Hey guys, welcome back to J-Rock Yoga. My name is Jess, and today in this short video, I'm going to teach you a couple fun ways to use your yoga blocks. Voguing might be one. So if you're interested in learning how to use your yoga blocks, just keep watching. Okay, let's get started. So one of my favorite ways to use yoga blocks is to deepen your practice. So a really great example of this is you'll need 2 yoga blocks, and we'll place them at the front of your mat. They could be on a high setting, they could be on a low setting. It depends on your flexibility level. So we're going to work on stretching the front body, and this technique could kind of be applied to any pose, and I'll explain how afterwards. So we're going to come into a puppy pose variation, which normally would look like this. The knees would be down, we'd be reaching, and this would be our full range of extension here. But when you add in the blocks, what happens is you give yourself this space from where the block starts to the block ends, and you're not sinking to the floor, you're sinking to almost nothingness. So you have to not only engage the muscles, but you have to sink a little bit deeper. So it teaches to go past your end range of flexibility, but in a safe way, because you can engage the muscles and teach them to soften while stretching. So what we'll do is we'll take our elbows and we'll place them right onto the top of the yoga blocks, just like we'd be going into a regular puppy pose here. But bring the palms to kiss, into prayer, and just start to sink the chest down. Good. So now pull the belly in. And what happens here is, since our elbows are up high, the chest has a little bit more space to melt down into, so the floor doesn't stop it. Now, very important in these poses where you're going a little bit past your end range is you have to protect the joints. So here, we don't just want to sink down just as far as we can go just because we can, right? We want to engage the armpits, we want to pull the belly in, and then we work the flexibility from there. If you can engage the musculature and still access that deeper level of flexibility, that's great. But if as soon as you turn the muscles on, your flexibility range lessens, then that means we need to work a little bit more on that active flexibility range. And this is a great way to do it. So that's the first option, and that's the one I use a lot in my practice, because if you're working on forearm stands and you're working on back bends, then we really need to get the front body open. This principle can be applied in splits. So if you already have your regular split, you can place a block underneath the ankle. You could work that end range. So you get creative with it, right? So if you're already deep into a stretch and you can engage the muscles, blocks can be added to that end range of flexibility to get even more flexible. Forward folds is another good one. You can already rest the belly on the thighs, everything's engaged. Add a block to the feet, right? That makes your legs longer, that gives you a little bit more of a reach. Great. The second way I really like to use blocks is to engage muscles that are hard to engage, or to kind of target certain muscle groups. So I'll show you what I mean. We'll come down to our backs and we'll bring one block down there. Now, for bridge pose, for a back bend, hands come down, we root into the heels, we lift up. You always hear the teachers say there's a magnetization, there's a center line that we're working on kind of hugging in. The knees aren't touching, but we want the outer thighs working, we want the inner thighs working. Now, so often when we come to our practice, we'll forget and the knees will be out here, or they'll be too far in. So if you take your trusty block and you place it in between the thighs, it gives your body somewhere to go, something to squeeze. So you gently squeeze the block and lift up. Now there's no way that the knees can plop out or flap too far in, because the block is preventing them from going in, but it's also creating that magnetization, right? So this is great for new practitioners or for regular practitioners who might get a little lazy. I know I'm guilty of that. Everyone's guilty of that. So these blocks can be used to engage the muscles that we're working to really turn on. Another good way to use it, and like I said, all of these techniques can translate between postures. So you take them and then you get curious, you get creative. This is great for core too. So again, you could take it between the thighs, legs can go up, and then we squeeze the block, right? So say we're reaching up to do some core and grab the rope in front of us. without the block, that's fine, but it's really targeting just the abdominals and the hamstrings a little bit. With the block, we're getting a full dynamic exercise because we're squeezing. I automatically feel my inner thighs light up, the outer thighs light up. It makes it so much more challenging and so much more beneficial for us. Another way, because those are both lower body, that you can use the block to kind of engage harder, to engage muscles. This one's a great one. So you can take the block, and depends on the shoulder width, right? So I have a smaller shoulder girdle. I'm a little bit more petite. You might need to get a little bit of a bigger block, or use one block and a half if you're male and you have a broader chest, or if you just have a different setup than me. But what I like to do is, say we're working our forearm stand, right? And those elbows, they keep sliding out. And we can't get the elbows to stay in because we don't quite have that strength in the inner biceps. We don't quite have that pull in the lats to kind of like hug it in. So a great way is to come down here to right where your forearm stand would be. The block is going to be inside the forearms, and we just hug the forearms into the block, right? And then we pick up the block and we put the block back down. And we pick up the block and we put it back down. And we do that, say, 5 reps, 3 sets, or something like that. So that eventually when we remove the block, we train that muscle memory, and those little baby muscles will now know how to fire, right? So blocks are great tools for that. And you can add on to that exercise by not being on your knees. You can be in down dog and do that, and that makes it core, it makes everything a little bit harder. So that's a really fun way to use your blocks. Get creative. Where can you create that tension? Which muscles aren't turning on? And how do we translate that into perhaps using the block as a tool to train them? The third way I like to use blocks is to support my practice and to make it more accessible for me. So you'll need one block, and an example of this would be in side angle posture. So we'll come into our side angle, right foot forward, back foot parallel to the back of the mat. And a modification for beginner yogis, or even yogis that are like runners with really tight hips, just anyone who has a little bit of a challenge in this pose, if we bring the forearm to the thigh, the left arm comes up. But we see all these yogis and they've got their hands on the floor and they're just, how do you do that? We take Mr. Trusty block and we take the block right here and we bring the floor to us, right? And we work the posture this way. So now our elbow's off the thigh, so we're working into that pose, and over time we take the block to a lower level. Over time we take the block to a lower level, and eventually, whoop, we don't need the block anymore. So that's a really great way to do it. It's super supportive. You can think about it in triangle pose as well. Any pose where we're trying to get the hand to the ground and it doesn't quite get there. So that's a way of the block supporting you to bring the ground closer to you. Same thing can be done in a downward facing dog pose, right? So we take the blocks, we place the hands, and we come into our downward facing dog. Now this really helps if our hamstrings are super, super tight and it's just so hard to get the hands on the ground. It also helps if we don't like a lot of pressure on our wrists. So again, it brings the floor closer to us. It makes the posture more accessible. Another way the blocks can support you is on your back. So you can take the blocks and you can put them underneath your sacrum, right? So if you're in bridge and the core just isn't ready, or the spine isn't ready to really lift all the way up, you can use the block as support. If you're coming into your shoulder stand and it's not quite good on the cervical spine or the neck, you can send the legs straight up, block underneath the sacrum. You still get a lot of the benefits of the posture. So blocks just allow you to get creative and allow you to make these yoga poses more accessible to you. The last way I like to use my blocks is to add a little challenge to your balancing postures. So you'll take one block and you'll place it at the top of your mat or wherever you're going to practice your balance posture. So normally, if we were, say, to go into tree pose, you'd have the right foot down, left foot up to thigh, calf or kickstand, and you would balance. You'd work on your stabilization. With the block, you can take your standing leg and place the heel and the ball mound of the feet on the block and raise it up. You're going to take your tree pose at a little bit of a higher altitude, right? And so what this does is it really turns on all the stabilizing muscles, because if you're using a foam block, it's not quite as hard as the floor, so it's a little bit harder to balance. So all these little stabilizing muscles in the ankle and all the way up the shin, they're gonna be firing. And then it also works your concentration and your focus, because we're elevated and it's not that much farther to fall, but it's a little bit farther. So if you do use the blocks for stabilization and for balance, once you come off the blocks, your balance is going to be so much better because you've already worked it at a higher level. I love to throw this one into my vinyasa classes and just surprise everyone because it's so fun and we don't often do it. So that's a really great way to add blocks into your practice if you're just looking to spice it up a bit. Thank you guys so much for following along with me today. I hope this video gave you some really creative ideas on how to incorporate blocks into your practice to help you get to the next level or to help you access some poses that maybe were inaccessible before. If you like this video, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel right below. You'll get notified. I post a new video every single week. If you'd like to follow me on social media, I'm at JRockYoga on Instagram and on TikTok. And if you would like recipes, blog posts, longer flows, all the good stuff, you can check me out at jrockyoga.com. Thank you so much for following along. We'll see you next week.